I believe in the past few decades, um, we've seen tremendous consolidation and continued consolidation for independent practices nationwide, right? My dad, a urologist in South Jersey, my granddad, a urologist in South Jersey, they went from just a 3-man practice to growing to be a 100 doc practice to being acquired by Summit Health to being acquired by Walgreens, right? Like the trajectory of consolidation is visceral in the story of my father. And there's upside for providers as that happens, but also a loss of agency. Like health information exchange, right? If you're doing manual record retrievals, why? If you're not getting your visit prep fueled by outside clinical data, right? Then you're behind. The ability to retrieve from 70% of providers on Epic, eClinicalWorks, Athena, Oracle, Meditech, all the big EHRs is trivially possible now. And so if you're on a smaller EHR that doesn't have that enabled, it doesn't have that whatsoever, then you're doing things painstakingly manually, and you can't even benefit from this AI revolution that's happening, right? An example might be the pharmacy workflow, right? 2 decades ago, you would print out a paper script, you'd hand it to the patient, they'd be responsible to take it to the pharmacy, and then the pharmacy would prep it, and then they come back and they pick it up. And they could lose that script. There's many things that could go wrong, and it's also just the fax and phone calls to support it could be expensive. And so the U.S. government incented and the tech vendors rallied around e-prescribing, and that is now ubiquitous in the United States. And that is like, check, we've solved one interoperability problem. PointClickCare, the largest skilled nursing facility EHR in the country. Epic, the largest EHR in the country. Henry Schein, largest dental EHR in the country, all being brought to court. And thus far, the apps have been winning, right? The third-party applications.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Scaling Practice Management, the show where we help practice managers grow smarter, not harder. My name is Jakub Grajcar. I'm the head of marketing at Talkie AI, where we help medical practices stop the phone from ringing off the hook and unburden their front desk team with our AI medical receptionist agents. And we're already helping 300,000 patients every month. My guest today is Brendan Keeler. Brendan, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Just living the dream. How about yourself?
Yeah, feeling good. I always feel good when we record podcast episodes. I was really looking forward to this one. I've been following you for a while on LinkedIn. So yeah, definitely an episode I was looking forward to. So first, a couple words about Brendan. Brendan might be better known to you, a lot of you, as the health API guy. His newsletter and his LinkedIn is an excellent source on how health data actually moves between systems. Brendan also leads the interoperability practice at HTD Health. I was supposed to practice that word, but we got through it. And before that, Brendan was a product leader at Flexpa and spent time inside Epic. So he's seen the EHR world from nearly every angle. And that's the plan for today, is to talk about the EHR and AI landscape and how we can help practices realize they might have more power than they think in this area. So super excited to launch into the conversation, Brendan. But first, we're going to play the warm-up game. Are you ready for the warm-up game?
Throw it at me.
Okay, so the first step of the warm-up game is please pick 3 numbers from 1 to 10.
Oh, geez. I'm a big fan of 6. It's got the 2, it's got the 3 built in. I'm a fan of, let's see, 7 is also lucky. And then just a classic 2.
Okay, 2, 6, and 7. So the categories you picked, and you're gonna pick one for your warm-up question, is food, childhood, or talent. Which one do you want?
Childhood. Let's go deep.
Childhood. Okay, all right. So, what's your favorite childhood memory? If you want to go deep, I'll pick that one.
Yeah, I have very fond memories of the Jersey Shore. New Jersey, where I grew up, is unique in that they don't call the beach, it's the shore, and you go to the
Mm-hmm.
shore. And I went down to, and it's well known for the Jersey Shore fist pumping show, the 2000s, but that's North Jersey, different beast. I'm from South Jersey,
Okay.
classy, beautiful, amazing. And so Avalon, New Jersey, I just have great memories with my grandpa, my grandma, my extended family going down there. And it's changed a lot in recent years, but yeah, I have tremendous memories with my twin brother and my sisters and the extended family.
Twin brother, cool. So tell us more about that. What did you do on the Jersey Shore? Would paint a picture.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's like it's a small barrier island, so if you at any given point between bay and ocean, you have maybe 4 blocks, maybe as low as 3, and sometimes more, but, so you can bike across it, and then it's 7 miles long, so you can go on long bike rides or runs, and you can hit what my dad calls the triple, so you can hit the bay, you can hit the ocean, and you hit a pool if you know someone with a pool in one day, and that's, the mythical awesome day of, a Jersey Shore life. Ice cream. I worked at the ice cream shop, the Buccaneer Ice Cream and Candy. Crazy boss, but like just like anything, your first job is you generally get a crazy boss. And then Brian's Waffle House, which is RIP, no longer exists. But we're good first jobs and a good way of meeting people and learning to talk to people when you have to do service industries.
Yeah, I bet if somebody's from that area listening, it brings up memories for them as well. I still remember my childhood ice cream shop, the best ice cream ever, and it was so cheap back then. It's like 4 times more expensive right now. But then it turned out, as when I got older, like 10 years after, that it was apparently like a front, and people were selling some stuff I shall not mention on the podcast out of there. So it had a dark underbelly. My ice cream shop.
Wow, we did not get
So.
that saucy there. We did have a giant ice cream fight. So it got
No,
late when it was rainy outside, so nobody came by the shop, and somebody
okay.
sprayed somebody with a little whipped cream, and then somebody threw some soft serve. And next thing you know, the whole place is a disaster. We took us hours to clean up, but it was really fun. But yeah,
Seriously?
no front games that I knew of. But I was pretty naive as a kid.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's a Polish thing. I don't know. But anyway, wow, ice cream fight. I'm glad I went there to hear that story in return. Awesome. Awesome. Good. Well, to the listeners, I'm smiling from ear to ear already after this. So thank you for playing the warm-up game, Brendan. That was amazing. And then for the second scaling practice management tradition, the question everybody gets as the first one on the show when we get into the expert stuff. And I do wonder about your answer. What is your number one tip for successfully growing a healthcare practice? Let's start digging into it.
Look, when you know how to use a hammer, everything's a nail. And so I'm a guy who works in interoperability. And so, like, of course, my answer there is going to be interoperability. But I believe, in the past few decades, we've seen tremendous consolidation and continued consolidation for independent practices nationwide, right? My dad, a urologist in South Jersey, my granddad, a urologist in South Jersey, they went from just a 3-man practice to growing to be 100 doc practice to being acquired by Summit Health to being acquired by Walgreens, right? Like the trajectory of consolidation is visceral in the story of my father, and there's upside for providers as that happens, but also a loss of agency. And so, if your goal is independence, and then you need to be as wedded into the entire system to have the efficiencies that the big health system has without the loss of independence. And so interoperability for digital referrals and e-prescribing and clinical data exchange, all these things allow for seamless marginal cost efficiencies for the things you need to do every day. And so I think there's tremendous leverage to utilizing these networks and pushing your EHR vendor and other vendors to play into to wade into those networks and offer them as a service to you.
Okay, interesting direction. Let's dig deeper into that then. So, for these independent practices, aiming to stay independent for the time being, where do you think the largest opportunities lie for them? Kind of the stuff that if they're not thinking about it right now, they might be a little bit behind already.
Yeah, like health information exchange, right? If you're doing manual record retrievals, why? If you're not getting your visit prep fueled by outside clinical data, right? Then you're behind. The ability to retrieve from 70% of providers on Epic, eClinicalWorks, Athena, Oracle, Meditech, all the big EHRs is trivially possible now. And so if you're on a smaller EHR that doesn't have that enabled, it doesn't have that whatsoever, then you're doing things painstakingly manually, and you can't even benefit from this AI revolution that's happening, right? The AI revolution is predicated on data, and so you in context. And so if you don't have the clinical context of the longitudinal patient record at your fingertips like other practices do, you're losing.
Interesting. So what's the play here? You mean if they are on an EHR that doesn't have this health information exchange, is the play to switch EHRs, pressure their EHR to catch up?
That's how it works, right? Like most small long tail EHRs, they don't know about HIE, or they're like, do my providers even want it? So like step one is like voice an appetite and desire for that feature. There's point solutions, right? Like if that's not a possibility, well then what point solutions are on market? On ramps to the health information exchanges. So you have Particle and Health Gorilla, Zus Health, No2, but those are all upscale, top of the line API first on ramps. There's things like connective health or abstractive health that target specifically independent practitioners and providers, and tailor to them in terms of user interface and PDFs and things that are a little bit more up the alley of the independent practice. And so there's point solutions out there that could be pursued alongside your EHR. And then yeah, and worst come to worst, switch to a better EHR. That should always be in play. It's scary, but at the end of the day, if you're going to get more value out of a different piece of software, then the migration is worth it. The change is worth it. The switching costs are worth it. And the bigger you get, the harder it's going to be.
Yeah, yeah, true, true. So one thing that I'm also curious about in this area is, this consolidation of independent practices. What's your personal take on this? What do you think is the shape of this trend in the sense of, do you think, the practices that are going to stay independent, why are they going to stay independent? And the consolidation in itself, is this more of a risk or more of an opportunity?
I mean, look, like there's so many factors that go into consolidation, right? You
Uh,
have anti-kickback laws and Stark laws and things like that mean like when you're in a larger integrated delivery network, you can sort of dodge those referral patterns and laws. You have the ACA and other things that force us down this path. There's the growth of payers and like big payers, big insurers, meaning that providers need to counter by getting big to push back on contract negotiations. So it's like disambiguating the cause is there's smarter people out there with more expertise about what's driving it. But at the end, and what does it result in? It drives everyone into the arms of Epic, right? Like if you're wondering why Epic is dominant, it's because they're for large, multifaceted, multi-department, multi-facility, multi-organization customers. They're the EHR that can service that best with a single integrated database. And so for people that say, "Oh, I want to take down Epic," or Epic should, is it the bane of healthcare in America? True or not, I don't know. But like, if you believe that, like, actually enabling independent practices is the counter, is the way to say, oh, actually, the independent practice can make a choice of technology of EHR that is, distinct to their own needs versus the Borg. And so, I think it's important because just like so many other things where we see consolidation and monopolization in markets, and I'm not saying for Epic, I'm saying for provider groups and provider systems, you lose choice and you lose the local doc down the street, and it becomes corporatized. PE comes into the mix and sometimes PE can be very good for companies and products, and many times, and the reason many people have a pejorative view on it is that it can squeeze it and financialize it and corporatize it in a way that removes the soul and humanity and community of business. And so, those are some of the things that I think people have to think about. And as a independent practice, I don't think you care about the writ large picture, but you do care about your business being successful. And so you should chase that
yeah.
as your prerogative.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this meshes with the conversations I had, an episode ago, 2 episodes ago. It's really interesting how the whole landscape shapes itself. I think people listening to this episode after the previous ones are gonna know what I mean. But yeah, we personally at Talkie, we work with a lot of independent practices who really care about staying independent, and they are echoing some of the sentiments you're mentioning here. They really care about not being corporate, about staying close to the community. They even do I had an interview with Dr. Lewis Gilbert from Cornerstone MD. Our clients, they go on these walks or runs with it's walks, walk with a doc, they call it, right? Walking with their community, having conversations about health, not about health, and just engaging in that way. So I think a lot of that resonates. All right, thank you for answering the number one tip question. And now to move further on our journey, the next stop is I would love to take a step back and set the stage a little bit more. So, if you could say more about, your context and where you come from into this whole conversation. A lot of people know you from your newsletter, the Health API Guy, maybe your work with HTD. So if you could tell us, the origin story of Brendan, what would that be?
Well, I need to find a job right out of college, and I
Uh-huh.
was didn't want to go home to my parents' basement in New Jersey and bring shame on the family. And so my friend said, I had
Gotcha.
an offer from Accenture. My friend was like, "Hey, come work for Epic." I'm like, "The video game company?" And he's like, "No, no, no, no,
Uh,
healthcare." And I'm like, "All right, sweet, it's a job." And so I went up to Madison, Wisconsin. I was working there a year. And holy moly, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun, but
uh-huh.
it was also really cold there. And so I was like, "Ah, man, I don't want to live in Wisconsin the rest of my life." And they offered for me to move to Singapore, and I said, "Shit, I gotta think about that one." I went home and talked to my family, and they were like, "You gotta go for it. You're young 20s." And so I went back and said, Send me to Singapore." And they said, "Nope, we gave that one away. Do you want to go to Dembos?" I said, "Sure. Where's Dembos?" And so I moved to the Netherlands, and I worked for Epic for 5.5 years on integration for implementations of Epic at software, at hospitals rather. And so, you'd have these big installs of Epic at hospitals, and I would be the guy who was in charge of managing the integration team to get all the other systems connected. And then I moved into more interoperability, not just how do we get all the systems within a single hospital connected, but how do we get hospitals connected to other hospitals to exchange clinical data? How do we get hospitals and clinics connected to pharmacies? All the cross organizational digitization, which is a hard problem because it's a multi-party problem. And so I've just been doing that ever since, right? I moved back to the United States in 2018. I worked at a company called Redox, helping apps get connected to EHRs across diverse EHRs, 88 or so in total. Went to Zus Health, helping apps get connected or practices get connected to Health Information Exchange, the nationwide networks for clinical data exchange. A company called Flexpa, helping apps get connected to claims data from insurers because that can be a rich source of the longitudinal picture for a patient. And now I consult because it's fun to see all the problem sets across healthcare, across those different domains, across stakeholders from small startups all the way up to the big tech companies, right? With big B and big T,
Mm.
clearinghouses, payers, clinical trials, lawyers, right? So many stakeholders that sit in and around healthcare that have different jobs to be done. And data needs to flow in safe, secure, permissed ways to essentially level up what are manual, heavy interactions, right? Interoperability is many different workflows, cross organizational workflows that need to be digitized. Because when they're digitized, they're marginal cost. When they're a phone call or fax or other work, more manual analog processes, there is a marginal, there's a an incremental cost to every time you need to do it. And so that's what the work is focusing on how do we get to ubiquitous networks that solve for specific problems. And so if you're a practice, you may say, wait a minute, well, what's an example? An example might be the pharmacy workflow, right? 2 decades ago, you would print out a paper script, you'd hand it to the patient, they'd be responsible to take it to the pharmacy, and then the pharmacy would prep it, and then they come back and they pick it up. And they could lose that script. There's many things that could go wrong, and it's also just the fax and phone calls to support it could be expensive. And so the US government incented and the tech vendors rallied around e-prescribing. And that is now
Uh-huh.
ubiquitous in the United States. And it's not ubiquitous in every country, but we focused on it and we solved it to a large degree, to a large coverage and, across providers and pharmacies. And that is like, check, we've solved one interoperability problem. There are many others where we're still faxing and phone calling and we haven't digitized the next workflow between all organizations.
I hear you, and thank you especially for the example because that makes it very clear for for people who might be a little bit further from this topic. And I can absolutely understand how because you mentioned it's a multi-party problem, like interoperability. And, for example, for these e-prescriptions, all parties need to agree to switch to that system, right? The pharmacies, the providers, the EHRs. So I absolutely understand that. One thing that also stands out to me is you're very passionate about this, and you've kind of stuck to this one problem for what seems like most of your career. What do you think it is, on a personal level about interoperability that is keeping you glued to it and keeping you focused on it?
I think there's some interesting like philosophical pieces to it. Like
Sure.
it's a distillation of the way that we interact and relate as humans, right? How we communicate.
Mm,
Any network problem is you boil down any network business, true B2B network, and it's either a communication network or a payment network underneath the hood. Even payment networks are just communication networks. And so
hmm,
essentially we're digitizing how do we communicate, negotiate, trust into computers, right? Like that's what those are. So it's like you can get pretty meta and philosophical about it. It also is burden reduction, right? Like all we're doing by digitizing workflows and making things interoperable is reducing burden on providers or front office or back office or different stakeholders. And that means people can do business more effectively. They can transact more. They communicate more, and they can spend more time on things that matter. So that's some of the reason. In this age of AI, data is really important, and so solving for these data problems, data transit problems, is a prerequisite to allowing this cool new technology to be available and usable for so many. And so I don't know. I'm a dork. I like it. That's it.
Absolutely understood. It's interesting how you mentioned kind of the burden or reducing the burden. I mean, even in the intro, I say it a little bit automatically these days, I will admit, because I read the intro, pretty much the same each time. But, we're in a similar business in that sense. We're trying to unburden the front desk, right? And it's, when you think about it at the end of the day, unburdening the medical system is just a net positive for everybody involved. So, it really, really resonates. Okay, you mentioned, getting meta and philosophical. So let's get back down to earth then and talk about something very, very specific that practices are dealing with. So, point solutions, right? Point solutions versus what's bundled with the EHRs, because most practice, managers or owners, they assume they're stuck with whatever their EHR ships with, right? Maybe the scribe that's baked in, more and more of these AI scribes are being baked in, the CRM that's baked in, or some other aspect of the system that's included, bundled. But you're saying that it's not true anymore from what I've seen, from what you've shared on LinkedIn, etc., and even from our previous conversations before the show, that there's more choice now, or that practices have more tools now to pick their own solutions. Could you explain that to the audience?
I tend to think of software in a reductionist way, and there's like only a couple types of software, right? You either have a system of record, right? That's your
Hmm,
core system, the brain of your business. And for some, that might be their custom or CRM, their customer relationship management software. For some, it might be, their ERP, their enterprise resource planning. It really depends. Not just healthcare, but any type of business has a system of record, right? Your accounting
mhm,
software or whatever. Graveyards have graveyard management systems. Schools have school information systems. You get the point. And they're all the last thing you'd pull out of your business when you're getting rid of tech and getting rid of you have to cut some tech spend because it's so critical. And changing that system of record is like doing brain surgery
right.
because it is so vital to your business that if you mess up, it could kill it. And so EHRs and practice management, as a superset, are the system of record for healthcare providers. Point solutions supplement. So point solutions are the yin to the yang of systems of record. They orbit it, they supplement it where it can't do things. And by virtue of it, they need to connect to that source of truth, right? They need to connect to the EHR or the system of record. Point solutions are at a disadvantage in doing so because systems of record, EHRs, at their core, they want to sell all the software that a practice needs, right? That is, if they are trying to maximize the amount of money they make, in a pure
Mhm,
sense, then they need to get to 100% of the tech spend from a provider practice would go to them. That's their ideal from a pure like PE wizardry type of thing. perspective, but it's rarely the case because really they do everything that a practice needs and meet there's different individual preferences. But so there's incentive for them to not connect to all the point solutions, to block the point solutions. And we see this time and time again across industries. For people that you go to restaurants in the US, there's a software vendor called Toast. Toast is a very, very popular system of record for restaurants that they sell all the sorts of things restaurants need. The front office for, in terms of the waiters going out there, the cooks in the back, the accounting stuff in the far back. And they have connectivity, what's called an API, an application programming interface, but it's
Mm.
impossible to connect to. It's too expensive. They don't answer your phone calls. And so like that's in restauranting, but like it occurs in everything. It occurs in car dealer management, it occurs in school information systems because hey, if there's no way to connect, there's no API, there's no input output, then you can't choose the point solution. You have to go buy the shittier version from the system of record from the EHR. And so that's the equation for forever, just by default, the equilibrium. And in healthcare, the 21st Century Cures Act is a regulation passed by Congress in their infinite wisdom, where they may have done something quite unique and quite good, either by accident or by on purpose. I don't think they imagine it to turn out this way, but sometimes you put enough shots on goal, one goes in. And so in
Yeah.
this one seems to have, because it opens up a world where point solutions with providers that want to use them cannot be technically foreclosed from competing. That the connectivity afforded to certified health technology, EHRs, needs to be the same inputs, outputs, the same connectivity afforded to and given to point solutions. And so that's pretty cool because all of a sudden the point solutions can compete on merits and not be dead in the water by default.
I understand that. And okay, so I understand that's kind of the idea of this CARES Act. How is it playing out in practice, though? Are EHRs playing along?
Yeah, so so let's go timeline wise. So 2016, Congress passes a law. Law
Mm-hmm.
in federal land in the U.S. needs to be converted into regulation. So you have regulators that take it, interpret it, expand it within their authority, and make rules that are first proposed, then finalized with comments by the public. And so that occurred 2020 to 2022, where we had the rules and the finalization, and information blocking became real. And then since then, we haven't seen enforcement, right? There should be this enforcement where people that are information blockers, these actors, these certified health IT vendors, these EHRs that do bad things and block information, electronic health information, are held accountable by these two regulators: the Office of the National Coordinator, the ONC, and the OIG, the Office of the Inspector General. But that has
Mm-hmm.
not occurred. We haven't seen investigations. We haven't seen enforcement. So people say, yeah, maybe it's not real. So you would assume that they would block, right? No, it's not real. And so, but instead, the private parties, so vendors that have been blocked, have said, well, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to take this to court. And they've used
Ah.
information blocking in court to sue the major EHRs, right? PointClickCare, Epic, Henry Schein. So PointClickCare, the largest skilled nursing facility EHR in the country. Epic, the largest EHR in the country. Henry Schein, largest dental EHR in the country. All being brought to court to use this federal to affect this federal statute in a way that the vacuum of no enforcement has meant that there's that otherwise it would not be real. And thus far, the apps have been winning, right? The third party applications, the analytics applications, and other apps that are going after these EHRs have been winning in court, and information blocking has been playing out to solidify that this principle that we just talked about, that point solutions cannot be arbitrarily blocked when it comes to electronic
Oh.
health information. So that's the reality now, is that, and what we see at HTD, at the consultancy I work at, is that EHRs are responsive when reminded of their obligations now. That when point solutions are blocked and they say, wait a minute, this feels a bit like electronic health information, and Dr. Smith over here wants to use my solution, if you're unable to help me, maybe we have to go do screen scraping, which is a form of EHI exchange. And in that light, all of a sudden that motivates EHRs to fix the things that are broken, to make available the APIs or other technologies that previously they were holding back, to create new APIs. And so it's extremely powerful. And so your listeners, these practices probably care little about that, all this tech stuff. The practical reality is it allows for more competition between vendors, more innovation, and lower costs. So there's more choice to choose and use the technologies in a way that's seamless for providers. And so that is powerful and exciting if I'm a practice owner, that I no longer do I just have to choose the default scribe, the default CRM, the default RCM.
Hmm. So I'm really curious. I mean, first of all, thank you for that explanation. Really took me on a journey and really elevated my understanding here. I mean it in a good way. Took me on a journey in a good way. And so now what that makes me think is, okay, you mentioned where we are on the timeline. So what I'm hearing is like the first consequences, the first court cases, maybe not enforcement from like the federal or I assume state level, but at least people are having these court cases, and as you mentioned, the third party vendors seem to be winning those. But I'm sitting at a practice, right? I have my EHR install, and what does that mean to me in the day to day? Is the time now to contact my, I don't know, Epic rep or maybe even my Athena rep, right? And to tell them, hey, I've seen this, AI front desk, I've seen Talkie, for example, right? And why haven't you integrated yet? Is there real room to apply pressure here, or is it more complicated than that?
I would look for the solutions on market that solve problems for my business. And then I'd push them to say, hey, I'd like you to be integrated. If integration is important to a workflow, right? There's certainly point solutions that can live shallowly integrated or not integrated at all, right? Copy paste integration as is a type of very rudimentary integration. But
Uh-huh.
synchronization of patient data and other key clinical information, to serve a certain point solutions workflow. If that's useful, well, you shouldn't be technically foreclosed. And so you can say, hey, point solution, have you integrated? And they should be able to say, yeah, I have. Or no, but we can. If they say no, we're blocked, well, you can say to them, well, you shouldn't be based on the 21st Century Cures Act. And you need to go push on that. And you need to go get integrated. So you can hold your point solutions accountable for the lack of integration if that's a buy-in prerogative for you and your business. And if your EHR is being intransigent, you and the point solution you've chosen have superpowers to go muscle.
Hmm.
There's that technical term, muscle the shit out of them, and so you should.
Technical term, huh? I love it. I love it.
Not
That's really
not
interesting.
not a legal term, not a lawyer. If you need a lawyer, there's great lawyers out there for this. I am just explaining aggregated trends that I see. Right? I can't
Sure.
claim to interpret the law, but I can claim to say to you and to the people out there what's happening on market today across these different court cases that are happening across the tactical, almost invisible battles that are happening between point solutions and EHRs. In those small instances, point solutions are getting what they want to compete. And that doesn't mean that EHRs aren't allowed to compete too. They should release their ambient scribe and their CRM
Right.
and all those things, right? More competition means that more innovation, lower prices, more selection and choice. And that's so the takeaway isn't that EHRs can't offer things, it's that nobody should be blocked in pursuing and solving problems for providers.
I absolutely understand that. The point about competition, being really candid here, right? We're integrated with a few EHRs, but it does also put it on our radar that now the default has changed, right? Because the default versus using something like Talkie was probably running your own front desk, having like an offshore call center. But now the default is going to change where, okay, I've got a front desk AI package with my EHR. What can you do for me that's better than that, right? And it's pushing us to to be even better at what we do, because the stakes for somebody like us is a little bit higher, right? That's the whole business here. Expanding functionality, of course, but still, that's probably why a lot of the point solutions end up being better quality, and it's just a matter of integration.
Yeah, I mean, point solutions have to take, oftentimes they're like, well, we had a good idea and now it's being copied. It's like, well, all things in life are copied. Like humanity's knowledge builds upon itself. And so I think there's an innovation pressure that every point solution has to live with, which is the system of records always coming. And so you always have to out innovate, out compete, and be 10x better. And so that's the challenge for Talkie and for any point solution, anyone is to go and to win. And so that's great for providers that because sans that it's like, oh, I've invented the ambient scribe and now it's only mine. Like if that was the reality, there'd be no innovation pressure. And so which can be the case, right? Like if you believe you have a truly unique idea, well, go get a copyright, go get a patent. Like it's hard for software to do so, but if that is the protection of what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just relying on trade secret law. And in that
Yeah.
case, you should just assume that over time, the innovations will diffuse to the market, and you're pushed to the next level of innovation, next level of competition.
Absolutely. And I think that leads me to the next question I wanted to ask you, which is more generally about this AI gold rush that we're seeing in healthcare right now. I feel like we've already been taking steps in that direction, right? Because I think from the perspective of a practice, there's a ton of money involved. There's a ton of noise. They're getting a lot of pitches for these AI solutions. What advice would you have to a practice like that? They're getting hit. Like, is there a particular part of their operations that is the most mature and worth automating now, or how would you tell them how to separate the wheat from the chaff here, if you will?
I think of where most investment going right now is going into AI. There's three
Hmm.
types of AI, right? There's um, or buckets, not even types. It's front desk AI, clinical AI, back office AI. And there's like sub problem jobs to be done, but they're converging. And so, for instance, ambient scribe is a popular one where it's like, oh, here's a clinical, ambient scribe sucking up all the audio and then spitting back out notes and orders and
Right.
diagnoses. Well, that's evolving into a clinical co-pilot. And we saw this from some announcements from a bridge, a very large ambient or vendor that started as an ambient scribe, but now as a clinical platform and co-pilot. Last week, they said, "Oh, we're going to do clinical trials, and we're going to show HCC coding, and we're going to do all these other jobs to be done." And so that's happening in every domain where the competitive set is evolving to be sort of all the jobs to be done, AI jobs to be done alongside a particular user, the front desk user, the clinical user, the back office user. And so I think each practice has to say, okay, am I going to go for a platform, a bundled platform, or am I solving for a particular problem set within each domain? In the clinical copilot domain, I think platforms are pretty mature. I think front desk and back office it's still more fragmented, and many people are still choosing the more specific. I'm inbound referral and fax for one job to be done, and then outbound voice and inbound voice for another. And so those are some of the general principles and frameworks I think about. And the other one is just like, what's your biggest bottleneck if you were to map your workflows in your practice today? Is the amount of time that people are spending on calls? Is it dealing with referrals and prior authorization? And then I would pursue tech that solves for those bottlenecks for you. That's I took the strategic and sort of framework descriptions first, but the more tactical is map your business and understand your business and say, what do I need solved to make it more efficient, to make my operations more efficient? And that will lead you to a vendor space, and you can look at the vendors in that space based on your unique buying prerogatives. And so for many, cost is a buying prerogative, but there's obviously other buying prerogatives of feature set and performance and onshore, offshore. Like there's just all these different things that make no two buyers the same. And so
Right.
mapping your workflows to understand your bottlenecks is step one. And then understanding thyself in terms of your buying prerogatives, because cost is not, is just one metric in that decision making framework and matrix.
Yeah, this reminds me of, in terms of helping practices make that decision, it reminds me of a book I once read called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And the question, the main essential, if you will, question of that book was, what is one thing that I can do that will make everything else easier or even unnecessary? And the answer to that question is going to be different for each practice listening to this. But I think it's one worth asking, right? To see where that answer lies for you. So, just making decisions like this is never easy, right? It's about, your appetite for innovation, and where you want to go with your innovation next, because you can't invest into everything all at once. So, that's one I would recommend. You piqued my curiosity though with one thing that you mentioned here. So Scribe's evolving into a co-pilot model. So what can we tell the practices about this co-pilot model? Because some of them are gonna hear this for the first time, and now they're wondering, okay, do I want a co-pilot? Is that mature enough? If somebody's selling me a co-pilot, what do I ask about that? I'm curious even myself, like what's the difference between just an AI scribe versus a co-pilot solution? And probably for the front desk, back office, maybe those are gonna evolve into co-pilots as well. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, so scribe is a job to be done within the Copilot framework. So AI
Right.
in general, you can think of two buckets. You have
Uh-huh.
co-pilots where they sit alongside a human user doing their job and help them be more effective at that job. ChatGPT and Claude and stuff, those are generalist co-pilots. They sit alongside you, type stuff into them, you do your job more effectively. But the other piece of AI is agents, right? And agents
Mhm.
are autonomous, right? They're like co-workers, right? They're just, you send them off and they're going to go do things and do things self-sufficiently and come back later. Yeah, is the promise of them. So those are the two buckets. And in the clinical realm, and within Copilots, ambient scribe was the most popular use case. Why? Because one, copilots in general are less scary than agents. Agents replace people. Agents suddenly are running up against regulatory and certification barriers, right? Can they do, if for clinical agents, could they do what a doctor's doing? Well, not legally, maybe not yet,
Mhm.
right? But copilots, well, they're just helping a doctor be more efficient, and that goes for almost all jobs, right? And so co-pilots in general have been less scary and thus more of a easy focus and win and a lot of VC attention. Within co-pilots, the scribe use case has been very popular because it's not changing workflows tremendously, right? If I was to do sort of active co-pilots where I have to dictate to it instead of typing, where I have to, uh, you know, use active changes to my workflow, there's more of an adoption barrier like any software. But ambient, I'm just doing what I was doing, and all of a sudden there's a note I get to edit. It's
Mhm.
like, whoa, sweet, efficiency, hypothetically. Or it's like, oh, it queues up orders or queues up diagnoses. It's like, whoa, like, it just I'm doing what I did before. So the adoption barrier is always there. And so that's why ambient scribe was the big first focus of the AI wave in healthcare. And now it's expanding because to other jobs to be done. One, because ambient scribe has unclear ROI. It takes like two jumps to get to ROI, right? You say, well, I'm making the doctor more effective, and that will accrue back to the healthcare organization because he or she will get through more visits or whatever was the original pitch. And it's like, well, no, actually, they're not going to be typing notes at home on their couch in their pajamas, and so it didn't the value accrued to the provider, which led to like less burnout. So the ROI, the return on investment was unclear, and so you see ambient scribe saying, well, in addition to that, I could take the ambient conversation and code the visit appropriately to maximize billing. I could listen for keywords and surface clinical trials to allow for better enrollment, better outcomes. I could push care gaps from payers into the workflow and reconcile it against the ambient conversation. So they're doing things that have like clearer ROI narratives and also are just sitting right there adjacent to the vantage point that they insert themselves to start with. And so, we'll see how far that goes, but really the boundary for clinical copilots and same for the other copilot variants is the number of keystrokes that are put into the EHR today, right? Like
Yeah.
hypothetically, the ideal is that the Copilot takes away all those keystrokes. That just says, "Hey, just click here to accept," and that could go for front desk too, right? Like, "Hey, here's all the faxes and phone calls, and like here's what we found out. Like here's what we've scheduled." It's like great, and so like that's the promise of these tools is to evolve into this
Yeah.
Copilot existing alongside these users. And maybe in the future, we jump over and lead to true autonomy. But again, there's social barriers there with agents that we're going to have to overcome.
Yeah, you don't have to tell us that. We have conversations every day about, I don't want to speak to an AI receptionist. Thankfully, though, that changes. We hear a lot of that, in the first weeks and much less at our kind of practices like 3, 4 months in or, half a year in. And it's interesting how it's like almost the flip side, the complete flip side of what you described, because we're on the agents model more so, right? The AI receptionist is more autonomous, picks up calls, makes calls. It's a voice interface for the patient, but then the result of that call lands straight into the EHR, right? That's why the integration is so important for an agent like ours. So there is a bit of an adjustment there. At the same time, though, you mentioned agents are risky in a clinical context, which is why it might be. I mean, I hear it on calls, but maybe the people I'm speaking with are a little bit biased. Where after AI scribes, the AI front desk agent is kind of the next wave, right? And we've kind of seen the increased interest, and that might be because it's not a clinical context so much. It's operational, it's scheduling, it's even giving information, like answering questions over the phone. A lot of efficiency can be gained, a lot can be automated away, even if it is in an agent model. So it's very interesting, kind of the contrast between the two. But it makes sense that people are looking for the places where there's the most efficiency to be gained with the lowest risk. And I guess we're kind of landing there in terms of, the landscape right now. So that just came up, as you
I mean,
mentioned that.
it's not a binary, right? Like, there's a couple
Uh-huh.
things here. One is what people perceive they want versus what they actually want, right? They perceive that they want a human person, and sometimes they do. But a lot of times, especially over time, if you can offer the outcomes they want in terms of cost and timeliness, then they're going to gravitate towards that, right? Like when Uber was taking off, they're like, "Oh no, I need to be in the premium. I don't want to be in this cheapo, app thing." And over time, nobody thinks about Uber anymore. And yeah, it's just people's perception of new technology that offers a lower marginal cost is perceived as cheap, but cheap is good. Like cheap can
Mm.
be really good, especially when it gets you the outcomes of your appointment scheduled or you get your visit or whatever it might be. And so I think you're right that we'll see a behavioral curve there. And over time, like, look, like, is a technology of many. And so high acuity, most important things can be still the scheduler or the front desk person or the call center.
Of course.
And the routine, if it can get good enough, well, we've been dealing with AI automation, deterministic AI of sorts in terms of phone trees, right? Like it's just the deterministic phone trees have been around for a long time and people have the same gripe. But at the end of the day, if it means if I can click and do the thing, then I'm okay with it. The problem with phone trees and things like that for healthcare and other services is so often you can't. So often the phone tree, you're just like, give me a freaking person because I can't get the job to
Yeah.
be done. I
Yeah.
can't get scheduled. I can't get a hold. My flight's rebooked. I can't figure out what's happening. And so it's more about the tool doing solving the problem over
Getting the
time
job
than
done. Yeah, yeah, absolutely understood. Really, really interesting. And I feel like we're just getting started in this discussion. Unfortunately, I thought our time for today is almost over. I've been really looking forward to this conversation, as I mentioned, Brendan. And I feel like a lot of listeners are gonna have this feeling that they want more. So how about, as the cherry on top of this episode, we direct them to where they can find you and follow you and learn more about this.
cool. Yeah, Health API Guy. That's healthapiguy.substack.com is the newsletter. Health API Guy on Twitter, X, right? If you're more of a musker.
The Everything app.
Uh, the Everything app. And then LinkedIn, Brendan Keeler. And then you can, I think I'm on Blue Sky and these other ones. You'd have to check. I don't really post on them, but you know,
Gotcha.
feel free to send me a smoke signal by any means necessary.
Yeah, I can definitely, from my point of view, I can definitely recommend the LinkedIn, especially. That's where I spend the most time there, right? So that I can recommend, from personal experience. Always interesting seeing your posts, and always, I may occasionally have to, as part of my ongoing education, maybe pump it into Claude and ask for a couple explanations to really dig into the details, right? But it's educational, it's a good kind of educational. So I'm glad you're doing this, and thank you for all the content. And yeah, we'll put that all in the show notes, dear watchers and listeners. Brendan, thank you again so much for coming on the show, and we'll close it off here. So, great conversation. Thank you so much, and thank you, watchers and listeners, so much for joining us here today. This has been Scaling Practice Management. I have been Jakub Grajcar, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye, everyone. Have a great day.